Chosen one, the waiting is over. God is funding your life from this moment forward. This is not a distant promise, nor is it something that requires more time, more endurance, or more prayer before it arrives. It is a decision that has already been made in the place where your name is held in the record that time cannot touch. You have been in a season designed to test what you were made of, and I need you to hear this clearly. You did not just survive that season, you passed it. The way gold passes through fire, not by avoiding the heat, but by remaining inside it, you survived by holding on to what you knew was true, even when nothing around you confirmed it. God sees what that kind of faithfulness costs. He sees the mornings you chose to rise when every part of you wanted to stay down. He remembers the prayers that felt like they echoed in an empty room and the quiet, honest moments when the gap between what was promised and what your life looked like felt too wide to believe. Across, that gap is closing right now. The season of invisible investment is complete, and what follows is the season of visible return. In the very ground beneath your life, the structure of your future is being rebuilt by the one who promised it to you before you were born. This is what God funding a life looks like, and it begins today. Before we go any further, I want you to notice something already happening inside you right now. There is a recognition stirring, a quiet yes rising from somewhere beneath your conscious mind. Something about this moment is landing differently than all the others, and you must trust that recognition. It is not wishful thinking. It is your spirit confirming what has already been decided in the unseen. Because what I want to speak to you about are the signs, the markers that have been appearing in your life, in your body, and in your emotions, speaking to you long before any external confirmation arrived. These signs are not coincidences. They are a language, and that language has been speaking longer than you realized. Let me show you what it has been saying all this time. The first sign that many chosen ones notice in the season, just before a major provision shift, is a change in their sleep. This is not the disrupted rest of someone overwhelmed in the ordinary way, but something more specific and deliberate. You find yourself waking in the early hours, sometimes at the absolute same time each night, with a mind that is suddenly and inexplicably alert and clear. It is as if something outside the normal rhythms of rest has been calling you into a quiet space that the daytime does not offer. You lie there in the dark with a kind of attention that feels significant, like the particular stillness that settles into a room just before an answer arrives. That waking is not your body misfiring, nor is it a sign that something is wrong. That is the part of you that lives in deeper awareness, being called to readiness because the shift you have been waiting for requires a version of you, present and awake in ways the routine of ordinary days has not been requiring. The disrupted sleep is not a problem to manage. It is a preparation to receive. The second sign lives in your body in a completely different way, appearing as a heaviness that settles without warning in the chest, a tension that holds itself across the shoulders and will not quite release, or a sense of carrying something invisible and weighty through the ordinary movements of the day. Most people who feel this call it stress or anxiety, and they carry it quietly. But let me offer you a completely different understanding of what that weight actually is. What you have been carrying is not a malfunction. It is spiritual weight. It is the weight of things held in trust that have not yet been released into your hands. The body of a chosen one in the final stage of a preparation season carries the spiritual significance of a provision that is not yet visible, but already real and in motion. You are not imagining the heaviness. You are feeling the significance of what is approaching, and what feels heavy before it arrives feels that way because it is not small. The third sign arrives without warning and without a clear reason, when you are moving through an ordinary moment, and suddenly emotion rises. This is not grief exactly, nor does it stem from a specific and identifiable pain, but it is something closer to a combination of exhaustion and recognition. It feels as if a deep part of you is finally releasing what it has been holding tightly for longer than you consciously knew. Tears at the threshold of a provision season are not a sign of weakness. They are a release. They represent the clearing that precedes the receiving, the opening that makes room for what is coming. When you feel this, do not fight it. Let it move through you. The fourth sign has been showing up in your relationships and the environments that used to feel like home. Things that once filled you have gradually ceased to fill you, and conversations that once brought energy now leave you more depleted. People who have been present for seasons begin to feel as though they belong to a chapter no longer being written, even when nothing dramatic has occurred between you. This is not ingratitude. It is the natural consequence of someone growing beyond a container that was never intended to be permanent. The discomfort you have been feeling in spaces that used to hold you is not a problem to fix. It is a signal. The container is too small now, and the reason it is too small is that what has grown inside you has outgrown the season that shaped it. The fifth sign is perhaps the quietest of all, but it may be the most precise, and that is divine timing. It is the right person appearing at the exact moment a particular conversation was needed, a word spoken from a source that could not have known what you were privately carrying, or a door opening. In the same week, another one closed. This does not happen randomly, but with the precision of something arranged, forming a connection too exact to hold the weight of the word coincidence anymore. These are not lucky accidents, they are coordinates, moments placed with intention to confirm that the path you are on has not been forgotten by the one who set you on it, and that the arrangement is still happening. 5 signs exist, and if you are honest with yourself as I named each one, you recognized at least 3. That recognition is not just what you want to believe. It is your spirit identifying a language it already knows from the inside. The signs have been real, and the shift they have been announcing has been real. But before the provision arrives in its fullness, I want to take you inside what was actually happening in the season that felt like the absolute opposite, because that season was not simply a test of your endurance. It was constructing something in you, and what it was building cannot be acquired in comfort. There is a woman in Scripture whose story belongs in this conversation, and her name is Ruth. In the original Hebrew, her name carries the sense of someone who stays when staying is not the easy choice, and staying was the defining quality of everything she did. She had lost everything that had structured her life. Her husband was gone, and the community she had belonged to was no longer hers. She was standing at a crossroads between what was familiar and something that offered no visible promise, no guaranteed provision. Yet she made the kind of choice that only a chosen one can make. She chose faithfulness when faithfulness had nothing material to offer in return. She said to the woman traveling beside her, "Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." These were not the calculated words of someone working an angle. They were the words of someone who had decided that faithfulness mattered more than security. She arrived in a land that was not hers with nothing except her willingness to work, and she went to the fields to gather what the harvesters had left behind when they moved through. In the heat of unfamiliar ground, in a season that offered her only the small things others had passed over, she worked with quiet dignity. She brought herself fully to the work available to her in the exact form it was available in. Then, one day, the man who owned the field where she was working looked up and saw her. This was not a connection she had engineered, but someone placed in her path by a provision she could not have arranged. He said to her, "I have heard what you have done. I know about the faithfulness that brought you to this field. I know what staying has cost you in seasons when leaving would have been understood. And from this moment, everything I have is open to you. Come to my table, take what you need, and know that you are fully covered." In a single encounter, everything that had been closed became open. The season of gathering what others had left behind was over, and the season of being fully covered, brought into the place she had been made for, was beginning. You are Ruth. You have been working in a field that was not your final destination, gathering the small and humble things available with a dignity that required far more strength than it looked like from outside. You have been staying faithful in a season that asked more of you than it returned. You have kept your hands open and your integrity intact in conditions that would have given most people permission to close both. The owner of the field has looked up. He has seen exactly what you have been doing, and what he has heard confirms what he always knew, that what he placed in you was worth the preparation it required. What the season was building was not visible while it was happening, but that is the very nature of formation. The thing being constructed beneath the surface of a life is always invisible from above. You do not see the root system developing in the dark. You only experience the pressure from above, the weight pressing down, and the seasons that appeared to yield nothing on the surface, while they were actually establishing everything the next season would need to stand on. Let me name what was being built in you, while nothing else appeared to be growing. The first thing the wilderness builds is a trust that cannot be shaken by comfort, because it was never constructed on comfort. There are people who trust God only when life is going well, and though their trust is genuine, it has not yet been tested by the conditions that reveal whether it holds when visible support disappears. Untested trust, when the first real storm arrives, often shows itself to be more hope than certainty. You do not have that kind of trust. What was forged in you through seasons of holding on without visible confirmation is a trust that does not require evidence to remain intact. That is among the rarest qualities possible in a human life, and it cannot be cultivated in a comfortable season. It is only available on the other side of a season that required it absolutely, and you have been living inside that season long enough to have it deeply and permanently built into you. The second thing the wilderness builds is an authentic humility, not the performed version. The world is full of people who perform humility, while secretly believing they deserve better treatment than they have been receiving. True humility, the kind that opens a person to receive from sources they did not anticipate and channels they did not arrange, is only built through the experience of needing without receiving for long enough that all the grip of self-sufficiency begins to loosen. You have been in that space and in that place over time, something released. The hands that had been tightly closed against the pain of lack began to open. That openness, that genuine willingness to receive from whatever source the provision comes through, is the exact posture that provision requires before it can land. God cannot pour into a closed hand, and the wilderness is what opened yours. The third quality formed in you is harder to name, but it may be the most important of all. It is the quality of someone who can be trusted with weight, ensuring they do not collapse when the ground beneath them becomes uncertain. It means they do not abandon what matters when holding it costs more than expected, but instead they stay. They return to the work even when the work is not yet returning anything to them, and they keep showing up to a story that has not yet shown them its best chapters, refusing to close the book while it is still being written. This quality is rare even among people of genuine faith, and it is precisely the quality that a major provision season requires of its recipient. The difficulty was the proof of your capacity, and you held it. Breathe here for just a moment, not because what comes next is difficult, but because you have been carrying what I just named, and naming it deserves a moment of recognition before we continue. What was built in you in that season was not small. It was the foundation of everything the provision will stand on. You did not know that while you were building it, but you built it anyway, and that is exactly what faithfulness does. There is a name I want to give you now, a name that belongs directly in this conversation about provision. It is an old name from a time when language was chosen with more care because what it carried mattered deeply. The name is Jehovah-Jireh. It is the name Abraham gave to a particular place on a mountain where God provided for him in the moment that looked most like the end of everything. Abraham climbed that mountain with a burden that no language can fully describe. And at the exact moment the need was absolute, God provided. This did not happen before, nor did it happen while Abraham was still comfortable and the need was still theoretical, but at the exact moment. Abraham named the place with a phrase that meant the Lord will see and provide. The word gyre comes from a Hebrew root that does not mean simply to look at something from a distance. It means to look into it, to perceive the full scope of what is present and what is coming at the same time. God has been looking into your situation, not just at the surface of your need, but into the history of it, the fullness of it, and the scope of what returning it to wholeness actually requires. Jehovah Jireh does not provide minimally. He provides in proportion to what he sees when he looks in fully. What he is releasing into your life in this season is reaching across 3 areas at the same time. The first area being reorganized is your relationships. There are connections in your life that were right for who you were becoming, but are not right for who you have now become. The provision season does not bring more of the wrong kind of people. Instead, it creates the right kind of space by releasing what has been occupying it. Some who have been significant in your story will begin to create distance on their own, and what is remarkable is that the hurt of it will be far less than you are expecting because the space they leave will be filled by arrivals that feel less like meeting someone new and more like recognizing someone you already know. God is reorganizing the relational architecture of your life to match the version of your future He is already building. The second area being reorganized is your sense of purpose and calling. The uncertainty sitting in the background of your days, the quiet confusion about whether what you are building is leading somewhere real, is beginning to lift. This is not because you will suddenly receive every answer at once, but because the path ahead resolves the way a path through early morning fog resolves. It clears as you step into it, rather than waiting for it to clear from where you are standing. Clarity arrives as you move. The provision season does not hand you a complete blueprint. It makes the next step visible, and then the step after that. The direction you have been asking for is beginning to resolve clearly. There is something I need to show you about this moment before we go further, and I want you to hold it in the back of your mind because I am going to come back to it and give you the full picture of it later in this message. There are researchers who have spent years studying what happens inside the human brain at the moments of genuine breakthrough, at the moments when a life running below its actual capacity suddenly begins to operate at what it was designed for. What these researchers have found, led by a neurologist who has spent more than 2 decades studying this specific phenomenon, is that the brain at those break-through moments looks measurably and documentably different from the brain still operating in survival mode. 2 regions of the brain that work together naturally and powerfully in childhood, and that the accumulated weight of adult pressure and survival gradually pull apart over the years of adult life, suddenly reconnect. When they do, something changes in a way that willpower and effort alone cannot produce. The capacity to recognize what is being sent in your direction sharpens. The ease of receiving what has been released increases, and the noise that has been drowning out the signal reduces to a level where the signal can finally be heard clearly. A doctor built something powerful from that discovery, something that makes that reconnection accessible to anyone, and I am going to show you the full picture of it soon. But first, there is more of your story to speak to. The third area being reorganized is the one most chosen ones have been holding their breath about the longest. The financial ground beneath your life. I want to speak to this truthfully. What I am about to say is not a vague promise about numbers I cannot know. It is a declaration about architecture, about the structural change that happens in the financial dimension of a life when the provision season begins in earnest for someone prepared the way you have been prepared. God does not fund a chosen one the way a paycheck funds a month, nor does He release provision in barely sufficient installments. When the provision of Jehovah Jireh is released into a prepared vessel, it is designed not only to meet the current need, but to completely restructure the ground beneath it. There is a Hebrew word that carries this concept. The word is shalom. Most people encounter it through the related word shalom, often translated simply as peace. But shalom in the original Hebrew means something far more expansive: completeness, wholeness, and the condition of having nothing missing and nothing broken. In the legal context of ancient Hebrew scripture, shalom described a specific kind of repayment, meaning not merely restoring what was taken, but returning far more than what was taken, with interest to account for the loss. You have been without things for years that you should have had, the peace of a settled life, the ease of forward motion, and the clarity of a future that felt real enough to build toward. Shalom returns all of it, not as a transaction that makes the loss irrelevant, but as the full acknowledgement that the years were real, and that what arrives now accounts for them completely. You are entering a Shalom season, and Shalom does not just mean comfortable, it means complete. But before the Shalom reaches its full visible expression in your life, there is something standing between you and your complete capacity to receive it. I want to address this directly because this is the exact place most messages about provision skip over. Yet it is the place that most often determines whether the provision arrives fully or arrived only partially. There is a particular fear that develops in chosen ones who have waited a long time, and it is not the fear most people would predict. It is not the fear that the provision will not come, but something stranger and more quietly devastating. It is the fear that it will. I want you to sit with that for a moment without moving past it, acknowledging the fear that the provision will actually arrive, because if it becomes real, the identity you organized yourself around in the absence of the provision has to reorganize as well. The story built partly around the experience of believing without seeing shifts completely. When the seeing arrives, the person who was the faithful one waiting suddenly becomes the person who received, and that identity shift for someone who has spent years in a waiting season is not simply welcome and uncomplicated. It asks you to receive without the armor of unmet expectation that kept you at a careful distance from full arrival. Beneath that surface fear, there is a deeper layer, a quiet unworthiness formed not in a single moment of despair, but through the slow accumulation of years in which what was promised and what actually arrived did not match. When a person lives long enough receiving less than what was promised, the mind begins to construct conclusions quietly through a self-protective process of gradual hypothesis, thinking something like this: maybe the promise applies more fully to others and comes to me only in a smaller form. Or maybe the gap between what I believed and what arrived is evidence not of timing, but of my actual value. These are lies, but they are lies that feel like earned wisdom because they protect against the specific pain of hope that is not yet realized. So let me name them clearly to dispel them completely. You are not too damaged for the promise, you are not too late, and you are not the exception to a provision that operates for all the other chosen ones, but not quite fully for you. The evidence of the waiting was not evidence of your smallness. It was evidence of the magnitude of what was being prepared. What requires large preparation before it is released is itself large. Long waiting is not low value, it is high stakes. You are allowed to believe this now. You are allowed to release the hypothesis of your own smallness, and you are allowed to outgrow the version of yourself that apologized for needing what you needed. You are allowed to step into the provision that was built specifically for the size you actually are. You do not owe the years of lack a loyalty that keeps you operating small. You have given those years everything they required. That chapter is entirely complete, and you passed it. Now let me come back to what I promised to show you regarding the neurologist I described, the one who has spent more than 2 decades studying what happens in the brain at breakthrough moments. His name is Dr. Daniel Barron. He practices in New York, and what he built is grounded in a discovery made by a researcher named Dr. Roger Sperry, who won the Nobel Prize in 1981 for proving something that most people never hear about in church or in school. Dr. Sperry proved that the 2 hemispheres of the human brain are designed to work in full synchronization with each other, and when they do, the whole brain activates. In studies of children, 98% of them show this whole brain activation state naturally, meaning they are open, creative, receptive, and able to absorb and connect information at rates that most adults have stopped expecting from themselves. Shockingly, less than 1 in 1,000 adults retain this capacity. The rest of us lose this synchronization gradually through the accumulated weight of stress, survival, and the slow dimming of what was once as natural as breathing. Let me tell you about a woman who found what Dr. Barron built from this discovery. She lived in Manhattan and had grown up in a family that believed they were inherently cursed. Her mother had told her from childhood that they were born under the wrong star, and her father gave 22 years of faithful work to a company, was promoted to the position he had spent his entire career moving toward, and watched that very company shut down in the exact week his promotion was finalized. Generations of evidence pointed to a pattern that seemed completely impossible to escape, yet, within 3 months of using what Dr. Barron created, that multi-generational pattern broke completely. She received a massive promotion she had not even been actively pursuing, and a relationship in her family that had been fractured for years healed in a way she had quietly stopped believing was possible. The synchronization of her mind allowed her to see the opportunities God was placing in front of her, moving her out of the survival mode that kept her family bound for decades. This same awakening is happening in you right now as the structural funding of your life takes place. You are being reconnected to your original design, clearing the noise of the past, so you can step into the absolute fullness of the provision Jehovah Jireh has established for you, beginning this very day.